Nicolas De Santis was an early winner of the dot-com era. He co-founded Opodo, one of Europe's first large-scale online travel platforms. He raised over $100 million to launch one of the world's earliest digital currencies, and has spent decades inside the machinery of technology, capital, and growth. Today, his focus has shifted from building companies to understanding how technology, capital, and entrepreneurship determine the future of humanity itself. Nicolas, welcome to Wealth Office.
Thanks, Michael.
I want to start with an old proverb, and it goes something like this. Society grows great when old men plant trees, the shade of which they know they will never sit in. When you look at the world and society right now in terms of technological advancement and entrepreneurship, are we creating shade for future generations, or are we currently trapped in a short-term thinking cycle?
I think we're doing a bit of both. Some parts of society are working to generate sustainability in our planet and a better world, and other parts are more focused on exploitation of our planet and short-termism.
So talk to me about visioneering. Let's dive straight into this. So visioneering is almost what you would now regard as your specialty. Now, we're not going to go over your CV, although in a moment I want to touch on some of your career highlights, but let's start with the visioneering piece. Yes. Explain to me what visioneering is and the principles behind it, perhaps more importantly, why it's so relevant to the world right now.
Visioneering is the ability of a person or an organization to explore the future, create the future, which requires a lot of imagination. We use, for example, science fiction narratives to create things that don't exist, that we believe improve the world, to bring to the present and create them with technologies, processes. So visioneering is also an attitude to the world. If you just think about the past and the present, you're limited in terms of what your potential is. So that's why visioneering is a critical component of strategy.
And today, part of the role that you occupy is advising mostly private, mostly family-led businesses. Yes. In this notion of visioneering. Why would or why should it matter to wealth and business owning families?
Well, we work with families that own big corporations, and because visioneering is not something that you learn in school or in business school. You think about it. Every time a family goes into a strategy meeting of some kind about the future and the legacy, they don't get that far into the future of what the potential could be. So they're limited by their own past. So for us, visioneering is a way for a family to reinterpret their mission and purpose towards the future.
I think I want to talk a bit more about family purpose, especially for wealth and business owning families in a moment. But maybe let's take that pause, I promise, to look a little bit at where you've come from. So I'm going to start by giving you a bit of a theory, a bit of a kind of concept theory that I have, and I'm interested in your perspective, and I think it's relevant to your experience. So something that comes up a lot on Wealth Office is this notion we're in a time of transformational change that the world has not seen before. I would go so far, and this is my thesis, of saying the invention of the printing press is a key moment for humanity. Mm-hmm. Some would say the advent of the internet, but I would actually say the advent of the internet is the end of the revolution that starts with the printing press, because it's fundamentally about access to better information. The AI age that we are still very much at the very start of is something different. It's not just about access to information, it's access to a higher order of intelligence that potentially expands humanity. Yes. Now, the reason I bring all of that up is you were one of the pioneers during the dot-com boom. You envisioned and created Opodo. It was very much an early pioneer of the online travel space and fundamentally disrupted and changed it. You also created Beans, one of the world's first digital currencies, perhaps a little ahead of its time in terms of technology, but it was a substantive play at the time, over $100 million raised.
All correct.
If you look across all of that period of time, how do you assess where the world is now? So, for example, are we in an AI bubble in the same way there was a dot-com bubble? And is the current AI focus building what we might call regenerative businesses, the idea of businesses which actually will help future generations? Because there's also a lot out there about the notion of rapid technological change making society worse.
Yes.
Looking at all of those decades and given your experience from the dot-com boom and the parallels, what's your perspective at the moment?
It's a great question, Michael. I think there are what I call cycles of technological development. We're now in a new one with AI. AI is not a new thing. If you know computer science or study computer science, AI has been present for the last 30 years in most computer science courses. Now, the issue of, is it a bubble? Yes, it is a bubble. Like in many industries, you have bubbles because everybody wants to make something out of it.
Let's expand that a little bit in terms of what the world needs. So I'm going to give you another thesis, and it's very much a core wealth office thesis, actually.
Yes.
A lot of wealth office focuses on a basic notion, which I tend, in my anecdotal experience, to find holds true. So the world at the moment has a lot of transformational potential derived from technology, derived from enterprise, and creating new solutions, new propositions, which have the potential to take humanity forward.
Yes.
There's a lot of enterprise and propositions, incidentally, which do nothing for taking humanity forward.
Yes.
And we're going to touch on that a little bit. But if we look a bit deeper, private capital is becoming more influential, in my view, than what we might call institutional capital. There's lots of reasons for that. We've covered it a lot in previous episodes, but private, let's call it family-controlled capital, can take longer time horizons, has a different aptitude to risk, tends to think in generations rather than 3 or 5 year investment returns. And by contrast, the other forms of capital which are out there, so say government investment, governments are by definition very short term.
Yes.
Now, on this series, we've had various guests. So one guest, for example, is Alan Law, who is a 3rd generation family member. He has been incredibly successful building a hotel empire and has now very much pivoted into the longevity space, where he sees a huge commercial and investment proposition, but also the opportunity to help tens or maybe hundreds of millions of people live longer, happier lives, which feels desirable, right?
Yes.
Now, the reason I use that example is in Asia in particular, but also more generally in these private families, there's often a duty to make sure that the next generation continue that family, that the wealth perpetuates or the capital perpetuates. But I would say there's 2 things stem from that, which are the 2 things that I really want you to opine on. One is increasingly those families cannot continue doing the exact same thing because continuity by being overly conservative increasingly feels like stagnation in a world of technological opportunity. But also more importantly, because institutional and government capital are slow, it feels to me like it falls like a duty on wealth and business owning families to make sure they are catalysts for backing and growing potential human improving technologies. I wonder if you can just give me a bit of an insight as to how you see that role of private capital, because for me, that's absolutely fundamental to building a much better world.
Yes, it's a great point. I work with many families, and some don't have vision, and I help them with the vision. So to me, the key, I will use 2 things, 2 concepts. First, the world is full of challenges that if you solve them, you're creating great businesses. But it's better to look at the challenges the world is facing, try to solve them, and like longevity, and therefore you have big potential industries. And also I would look at, try to find disruptive innovation. Disruption is a key thing when you're creating a new business. Are you disrupting something that exists? Therefore longevity, are you improving the way the health services are provided to extend lifespan? Or other areas clearly are you creating a new thing that doesn't exist, and therefore you don't even know the size of the market? But that's kind of the 2 areas, new things versus disrupting existing things is what I would focus on.
So disruption is obviously a part of your modus operandi. Just take me back a little bit. I'm interested in the thought process because it feels very relevant to the notion that families should be adopting the responsibility to have vision which goes across generations.
Yes.
If you take me back to Opodo or even Beans, just give me some insight into how those things came about. What was the thought process that led you to those particular categories at that particular moment in time?
I think with Beans, we're looking to create the first digital currency of the web. That's what the concept that I created basically as a brand. Mm-hmm. So there was no digital currency. And I thought, I joined the team to do it, to create this digital currency. So that was a disruption in itself in a time where there was no discussions about, do we need a digital currency? With Opodo was more about disrupting existing big travel players that were not offering a good service online. The technology there, the disruption was the ability to connect directly to hotels, car hires, airlines, to be able to do better pricing. Therefore, that was a disruption in travel distribution services. It's not easy to find things to disrupt because otherwise we would see it every day. But I think to me the key is, are you providing something that improves both from a business perspective, but also from providing humanity with a better approach to doing something? That's not easy. There are simple ways to do it, in the sense you could say that there's many things that we use today that are not really up to standard, and try to improve those, or you can really say we're going to change the game. Mm-hmm. And then you look at what a family can look at is, what is the end game of the family in this society.
Let's turn for a moment to our planetary futures.
Yes.
So there's some work that you have done, and for our viewers on YouTube, we'll add a link at this moment they can click on to have a look at the website that summarizes it, and there's a good graphic. But when you articulate our planetary futures, you essentially have mapped out 3 broad trajectories for humanity.
Yes.
And it's something we've done before. There's a Wealth Office episode with Shield, who is building an AI edtech company. And he and I talked in detail about how AI and education can work in tandem to either bring a much better humanity, but also there are scenarios where it could go wrong and make us worse. Now, our planetary futures, you map out 3 trajectories. Can you take me through each of those 3 and what you see as the decision criteria that determine where humanity goes?
Yeah, the reason why we created these planetary futures is because there's always the question is what happens in 20, 30, 50 years. So to me, it was easier to say, okay, let's think about what's happening today. There are things that are enhancing our potential as humans. There's things that are keeping us stagnated in situations that we don't want to stay. Mm-hmm. And the third one is self-destruction, where we ourselves, through technology, can destroy ourselves. So that is happening today. If you look at what's going on in the world, those 3 scenarios are happening today. We have incredible things happening, we have stagnation, and we have things that are destroying our planet. Mm-hmm. Climate change is one example. So with those scenarios, the important thing is what is the role of technology in those 3 scenarios? You can look at 50 years in the future and say, if a family today is thinking what are those futures they want to create, I'm sure they're all going to go for the improving humanity scenario. Mm-hmm. But they might come from a business that is no longer fit for purpose or is not providing enough value, but it's still generating cash for the family. Therefore, their future investments could be more towards what challenges can this family help solve through new businesses, because a lot of them are already doing charitable work. Mm-hmm.
I'm increasingly skeptical about charitable work, and that sounds like a very negative thing to say, but especially when I speak to some of the more pioneering kind of entrepreneurs or capital holders that I speak to, increasingly it feels to me 2 things, in fact. One is, when we're talking about wealth and business owning families, there's no point being a wealth or business owner if you have to exist in a non-desirable world where you have to travel with security and the climate is failing and your grandchildren are going to be maybe very comfortable circumstances, but the world around them will not be good at all. So, and increasingly it's a positive actually. I find families who are adapting to that to think about how do we infuse genuine human purpose into our commercial activities. That to me feels much more desirable than just philanthropy, when philanthropy takes the form of signing checks. A check is singular. If you build companies, enterprises, then you potentially can create ongoing permanent change. And actually as a corollary of that, we're seeing certain companies now which actually the ownership gets passed from a family into a foundation.
Yes.
So that actually it's not even about the family anymore, it's actually about purpose, which is also, in my view, quite attractive. What's your view?
I mean, I think charity is been going on for many millennia, basically. I think today, because we now understand our planet and how it works well, we understand that money has to be invested in solving our global challenges. We know the destiny of our planet is going to be burned by the sun in 5,000 years. So the question, 5 billion years, sorry. But the key is, if you already know the end game of our planet, what is it that we need to be investing to perpetuate humanity beyond our planet? So that's kind of one of the things I use to help people open their minds about and think big. Because if you don't think big enough, that's one of the problems I see. Families don't think big enough. They get their short-term thinking impedes them from that. So I believe that even if you say I'm thinking big, think much bigger, because the dimension of what you want to build will then dictate the ambition of your challenge.
And when you think about the planetary future and those three scenarios, let's unpack them a little bit. So I'm going to have to refer to my notes to get this right. So the best scenario is one you call mega visionary potential. And that includes cooperation, ethical tech, planetary governance. I want to dig into the governance piece in particular. The kind of midpoint is human stagnation, which is kind of how the world feels now, which is constantly wrestling with short-term crises without any major human improving transformations net, let's say. And then there's the self-destruction. So self-destruction, fragmented governance, more conflict, more collapse. And in your model, that's 3 techno-human trajectories.
Yes.
Just unpack each of those for me in terms of how each one occurs in your view.
Okay, the interesting thing about the scenarios, the 3 futures, is that they all use technology. The maximum potential of humanity is when our global governance is really collaborative. So we're all aiming to achieve the same challenges and goals. Solving cancer, Alzheimer's, peace, stop malnutrition, stop hunger. That means that it's a complete change of governance in the planet, where the nation state can no longer be the main actor, because if we continue on nation state thinking, we go to the stagnation, which is where we are today. So the question is, the stagnation scenario is where we invest more money in war than we invest in health.
Yes.
So, which leads to the third scenario, which is self-destruction. We're self-destructing ourselves right now in different parts of our world. Ukraine, Gaza, I can keep going on many conflicts. And the issue is, as humans, we know these 3 scenarios are going on. When you look at the news, you see good news, less good news, and terrible news, and we live with those 3 scenarios. And the 3 scenarios use technology to achieve them. So to me, the 3 planetary futures is based on the ability of countries, nation states, and all stakeholders involved in cooperating, which means a complete change of purpose, vision, and governance that today doesn't exist. So today, what we call the strong men of the world are ruling by force, by fear, and by threat. Now, there's many regimes in the world also that use the same to manage their governance and people. So what we can do, though, is I'm sure everybody the majority of the world wants to improve the way the world works.
Yes.
I'm sure about that. Evil exists, it's always existed, but there's more good in the world than evil. So to me now, I think the key will be to generate a new level of governance, which in the end also the UN is no longer fit for purpose, is not solving or bringing people to a table to solve things anymore. So we need a new level of global governance to achieve this.
How do you think we bridge that? Because I think I agree with you. I think it feels like we're in a time where fear is used a lot in politics. Generally speaking, if you meet another human being in any part of the world, their values about the future are usually aligned. Most people would agree it's desirable that you create a better future for your kids, your grandkids, your great-grandkids. I think most people would even agree they would make sacrifice now to ensure that future if they had to. Technology potentially means you should be able to do it without sacrifice with the right governance in place.
Right.
But how do you get from where we are now to that world where there is a vision which people are united around? Where does it even come from? And actually, can we rely on politics as a source, or actually do we need visionary entrepreneurs who can actually set up a vision for the future and create the services and products that help to get us there?
Well, I've looked at this issue. It's a great question. I look at this issue all the time for many years, and there's one concept called philosophy that really answers many questions, and these questions were answered thousands of years ago by Greek or Roman philosophers. You cannot, when you're part of a system, which is our planet, you cannot achieve those goals without cooperation. Mm-hmm. So for me, the idea of cooperative global governance or non-cooperative global governance, it requires a new system. So, which leads to cooperative global governance. You have to remember that the nation states are really new things. They've been there, for not many centuries. So the key here is to say, is the nation state the best instrument to create that global governance? And I think the nation state can exist, it will exist, but you need a new level above. Mm-hmm. And the UN is not the solution to that level. So we need a new global governance philosophy. I don't say global government, I say global governance. Mm-hmm. We don't want a global government.
It's an important distinction, is it? Because I think most people would not want an extra layer of institution on top of what exists already, but it does absolutely feel like a philosophical alignment. If you take, let's use the United States. Like, it's a country that has its problems, but its position in the world is obvious, and actually what the United States creates for its citizens, again, net to net, is built around this very clear philosophy of, let's call it the American dream, is the shorthand for it. It kind of works. It works. It transcends politicians, it transcends institutions, it exists amongst people.
Yes.
We almost need like a global dream which is not decided by politicians or by institutions. And if somebody could really work out how to get us there, that it feels so highly desirable.
Yes.
What would you say are the main governance failures right now in the world? Just looking at those three planetary futures again, so that the stagnation and the self-destruction, we've talked about conflict already. Yeah. There's a long list of items on the website which we'll share online, but just give me a sense of maybe the top 5 major problems that the world should be solving, almost as low-hanging fruit.
Okay, I think the number one, what I think drives those planetary futures is whether we can achieve a common vision. Because if everybody has their own vision of the future, it's a bit complex to align them. So that's why you need a level of, call it clarity if you want, or common sense that says we all have the same problems, we all live in one planet, we need to breathe air to live. So there's a lot of commonalities in the end. So the common vision, obviously, I think, now that we know that we live in a planet that is going at thousands of kilometers an hour, to me the key is to do we achieve a common vision of where we're going as humanity, not as nation states.
Yes.
Otherwise, look, everybody's going to go for resources like it's going on right now. What land can I take so I can get resources so I can keep building and manufacturing stuff? That's very short term.
Yes.
Can I build more mobile phones? So to me, the key is a common vision of the planet that philosophically is agreeable by all the actors that need to be agreeing to it. And the actors really that should rule the world are the citizens of the world, So we're always going to have diversity of opinions, but if we don't have a common vision of where the planet needs to go, that's why we have these three scenarios and not one scenario. It's because we have this cultural, which is a historical inheritance that drives people to think with different visions of where they think the future is. So we have to be practical at this point for future generations, the people that will not meet, but that we still are building a planet for, is this vision has to be common.
Which kind of comes back to the kind of mega visionary philosophy and even the meta thinking. It's the building tomorrow not as a function of what came before, but almost having a break point and deciding what tomorrow should be rather than it being purely functional. I think my view is still very much that has to come from private capital holders and enterprise. I think like most people in the world have very little faith in politics to get us there.
Yes.
But it still absolutely would require that absolute binding philosophy. And I want to dig in a few minutes into that a little bit more in terms of how families, and in particular families where wealth is passing between generations,
yes,
should be starting to think about it. We're talking about governments a lot, and we try not to do politics on Wealth Office for lots of self-evident reasons.
Of course.
Also because there's certain things that I become my hobby horse when we talk political. But if we're frank and we're honest about the
yes,
reality in the world right now, we do have nations, and each nation is a platform for entrepreneurs. If we accept the premise that entrepreneurs can build a better future for humanity, it does become very important that each government creates a platform for entrepreneurs to be able to build those future solutions or invest in those future solutions. I'm interested in your perspective on which parts of the world are doing that really well right now, which are working in unison to create great platforms for investment for
yes,
entrepreneurs, and which are not. Now, it's a slightly loaded question, and I'm going to do one thing for you in this.
Okay.
We're sat in London today.
Yes.
I run a global business from London, so
Yes.
do you. In my case, we do no business in London itself. We're here because it has been
Yes.
a great place to be. It's
It is.
changing a lot at the moment. I would say in the UK at the moment is a hostile place to try and build a business. And if you allow me 45 seconds to do my hobby horse.
Sure.
If you're building a business in the UK today, every job you create, you're going to pay a 15% tax on that job on top.
Yeah.
Every dollar of profit, you're going to pay around 28% corporation tax. After you've paid that, if you want to take a dividend, you're going to pay another 40% tax on that dividend.
Yes.
If you ever want to sell the company, you're going to pay 40% on the sale of the company. If you die, God forbid, you're going to pay 40%
Yes.
tax on the value of the business before it can even pass to your children. Now, I would say, regardless of technology, that is an environment where it makes zero economic sense for an entrepreneur to
right.
even exist.
Yes.
So I've done that bit for you. I've done the UK
Thank you.
mess.
Thank you.
Let's focus on the positive. So if the UK is an example of getting it wrong, where is getting it right from your perspective?
It's a good question. So there's two answers, I think. One is there are great places for minimizing tax. And there are great places where you can find money. So I think the world today, if you have a good idea, you can go and find capital around the world. I wouldn't just focus on UK, or even if you're based here, go around the world because you'll find money for good ideas. The establishment of locations in the world for minimizing tax, there are few now left in the world. There are some that are better than others. Italy, for example, if you're an entrepreneur and you are making already considerable money, it's a place that by paying 200,000 euros a year, you can live there with a minimal tax. You pay 200,000, and all your earnings from foreign, all your foreign earnings are not taxable.
No, I should be really clear when we're talking about this, incidentally.
Yes.
It's not necessarily about cash or profit maximization for
Okay.
an entrepreneur. Actually, part of what I'm alluding to in this is the notion that the more money you leave with an entrepreneur in a company, the more capital they can compound into these innovations.
Yes.
So I'd hate for people to think we're just talking about this in terms of a maximizing wealth
No, I
perspective.
think I understand your question. I was trying to arrive it in a way that sounded positive, because it's not easy to find a good location for that does not take too much from the entrepreneur. It's difficult these days. I think that's why you have to, if you're an entrepreneur, you have to understand that you will have to use multiple locations for maximizing your profits so you can reinvest them.
Yes.
You can no longer say this place is the best because maybe that place is the best for taxation, but it's not great for innovation.
I agree that the notion of, even as an early stage entrepreneur, building from the outset a multi-jurisdictional business is becoming critical in the world as it is at the moment. I want to have a bit of a gear change, actually.
Okay.
It's just something else, which is something we repeat a lot on Wealth Office, and it ties into some of what we've talked about in technology, building the future, and also your previous entrepreneurial achievements. It's very relevant to get your perspective. So I talk a lot on Wealth Office about China and wider Asia more generally. And the thing that we revisit a lot is a lot of the Western world, I'm going to generalize, but it mostly holds, a lot of the Western world still regard China as a fast follower, not a primary innovator. So innovation, they assume, occurs in the West, and China follows and copies and duplicates. Now, I've had many guests that I've spoken to about this, and consistently across the board, everybody agrees that is very much now a redundant view, and it's happened very quickly. I think I saw a meme on LinkedIn yesterday. And in the age of AI, one never knows whether you can trust a meme, but it was something along the lines of Boston Dynamics took 30 years to build their humanoid robot. And there's a Chinese company have in 8 years built one, taken it to market, and it costs a fraction of the Boston Dynamics one. Now, I could give you a similar example about electric cars, for example. Now, if you accept my premise that China is becoming a primary innovator because it has capital, it has a big population, it has the drive, and to be frank, it has vision in a way that the West does not at the moment. Is that potentially Asia being the crucible for this next iteration of humanity? What's your view on the importance of Asia in taking us forward?
I have no doubt that Asia is looking at the future in different ways, and they're ahead in that thinking. They are building the future of many things conceptually. I think what they realized, the example you use about robotics, they've learned of how not to do robotics, and understood if we want to do robotics faster and achieve a certain level of technological primacy, they need to build what is called an intermediate layer of technological knowledge that will propel them to do it faster and better. And they learn from the West a lot, of course, but now they're applying the lessons from the West better than the West, purely because the governance there is completely different. So the government of China is basically understanding they're preparing for something, I think, for call it global domination, or because they know that they don't need to dominate the world in a negative way. They can dominate it by being better at doing things. Technologically, they're ahead. I mean, the people that say that they're still copying, they haven't been to China. I think that it's the future of our planet is Asia. Now, they know that, and that's why they've invested sometimes silently, sometimes not so silently, in all over the world. Africa, Latin America, Europe. For the last 30 years, they've been investing in raw materials, infrastructure, companies, oil. They have investments in many places. So they're thinking clearly. I think maybe it's because they have this ability to think less politically and more practically than if somebody has to win an election every 4 years.
I think that one of the reasons that becomes very interesting,
Yes.
this emergence of China and also of Asia more generally, it's not just China, is certainly for the last 2, maybe up to the last 4 centuries, the world has operated on Western precepts across business, across philosophy, across economics, across politics.
Yes.
And actually, as the power shift changes in terms of economic power, it also means that the world moves away from the Western dominated precepts in terms of how the world operates. Now, some could say that presents inherent danger. If we look through 2,000 years of history, every major transfer of power has been coincided with war and things that are
Yes.
not good. Now, let's be optimistic and say we're in different times and maybe that doesn't need to happen. But it could also be potentially a way that the world starts to transition to this kind of more forward-looking way of doing things. Now, when I spoke to Shield, one of our wealth office guests, he made the point that despite saber rattling, China, for example, over its history, doesn't tend to create wars and it doesn't tend to invade its neighbors, which is probably inherently a good thing. Maybe part of building that better future for humanity is actually nations competing in technological races, in business and economic races, rather than engaging in actual arms races and actual war.
Yes.
Now, I'm possibly being naive, maybe even wildly optimistic, but there is a time of change in the world, which feels like it could be an interesting moment for catalysting some of those better futures that you talk about. And actually within that is one of the things that I think is very relevant to the planetary vision you make, which is energy in particular.
Yes.
It's not an interesting subject. It's absolutely key to the future
Yes.
of economies
Yes.
and people. And unfortunately, I don't come to this episode equipped with the full statistics, but if you look at China's progress on renewable energy, it's frankly mind-blowing. And actually, if they as a nation can provide cheap, clean energy to a third of the world's population, that by itself feels transformational. And it almost feels to me like the West needs to start learning from Asia rather than making the conceptual assumption that the Western precept is the correct precept.
Even the point you just made is about vision. So if 30 years ago you did not think what are the needs and growth of energy that we require to service, and you think about it now, you realize that you should have made decisions 30 years ago because
Yes.
building infrastructure for energy is expensive and takes time. So the political environment of the world also dictates what types of energy should you or could you be producing. But energy, the thing about it might not be sexy to talk about energy or minerals or
Yes.
mines, but it's vital because we mine, energy is required for anything. And as you know, we had a huge spike in energy costs, electricity cost, more than people could bear.
Yes.
So we're not in control of energy. We're not in control of energy prices. Energy is like oxygen now. So if the cost of breathing was charged, the question is how much will we charge for air?
Yes.
So electricity is costing enormous amounts of money. Most companies actually lose money that are involved in industry because of their cost of energy. They cannot make a good profit.
I agree entirely. Here's one of my big visions for taking humanity forward. No government in the world is going to do this anytime soon, but why not make energy free? There's plenty of things in most nations which are public goods. So driving on the roads generally is a public good, because that is critical infrastructure to a nation. I would say in a technological world, especially with AI, which consumes a lot of energy, why not make energy a public good, which means that all people can afford to live in their homes, businesses can afford to innovate without energy costs and energy shocks. It feels to me like that would create stability. Now, I can't imagine a single government that will do that anytime soon.
I think you can look. It's a business model. If you have roads that are in many countries, some roads are private, some are owned by the government, and the private ones you have to pay a toll. So the question of energy is, I don't mind paying for energy, but why should it be so expensive? And then it's a question of who owns the companies. Is it the government or is it private enterprise? The market of energy is extremely regulated, but I can see even with that regulation, the prices are beyond what people can afford,
Yes.
even corporations. I'm on the board of one of the biggest silicon metal producers in the planet, and our cost of energy is enormous.
Yes.
Especially in Europe.
I think it's where that need for a vision came in. You know, it's a few years old now, but there was a piece that Bill Gates authored. It may be more than 10 years ago, in fact, and he was advocating in that piece for the notion of let's stop taxing humans and business. Let's tax robotics and use the taxation revenue from robotics to provide things that people need in their lives, and therefore potentially free people up to pursue things which are not about paying their mortgage and their bills, but actually about taking humanity forward. Or at least, I think it's almost a ladder. It's you take yourself forward, you take your family forward, you take your community forward, your country, and then you take humanity forward, and giving people the freedom to do that. I'd almost say maybe there's an evolution of that for today, which is if you say that AI is going to change the world, if you could have a global agreement, let's tax processing power, let's tax data power as an alternative to robotics, would require global cooperation. It's not going to happen, but it gives you the seeds of some of the ways you could have fundamental platform change in the world to help humanity go forward, I think.
Yes.
I'm going to leave that thought there, though, because I want to move us on a little bit. So thinking about visioneering, and in particular the work that you do with families, which we've touched upon already, I'm very interested in your perspective on the next 10 years, the next 50 years, the next 100 years. Maybe give me, I was tempted to ask for your best and worst case scenario, but let me ask you this. What's your genuine belief about how the world develops in each of those time frames?
I think, so looking at history, we're in 2026. And we learn a lot from 2,000 years of history since the Christian era. But if we look back to beyond that, before that, we know very well now where we come from and where we're going. We still need to find out where life comes from, but in a way, we know it comes from space, the mixture of the fusion of stars that then develop molecules and so on. The question, so if we know reality, and that's a good point that I want to make, I think today people don't understand reality. They understand the here and now, but the reality around them and everything that builds that reality, I think they're not aware of it. And that's the ability to manage complexity. So complexity, I see it as a very positive thing because our human body is made of many complex systems. So if you don't like complexity, you're not going to understand the world. So you have to embrace complexity, and that's why we focus a lot of our efforts in generating tools to understand complexity. Because without complexity, you cannot build anything that's of value. Now, many CEOs say, oh, we need to simplify things. There are things that you can simplify as, for example, a process, but complexity is still the key to generating future value. So visioneering really is about understanding that complexity into the future and making the most of it, not to reject it, because rejecting complexity is basically a fallacy. We're in a complex world. Today is sunny, tomorrow it will be raining. So to answer your question, I think that understanding complexity, which means how things are now, and having a vision of where we need to be going to solve challenges, and also beyond challenges to create a destiny for ourselves, which will be in space, clearly, is what we should be investing on, rather than the problem of having nation states and governments and political scenarios that keep us in that stagnant path. We're stagnant because of that. I'm not questioning democracy as a tool. I'm questioning the people that manage that democracy.
I think there's definitely an opportunity for better democracy. You see, I know many very talented young people who have moved to, I won't name particular places, but certain cities in the Middle East,
Yes.
And people will say, well, you're sacrificing your right to vote and your democracy. And they'll say, well, my housing cost is lower, my opportunities are higher, I can live a much better life. I'm happy to make that trade-off, actually. And I think that's a fundamental indicator to the current failure of democracy, that it doesn't seem to even justify its own value. I think also there's an element of, it seems slightly anachronistic, this notion that you vote for a person or a party. Let's use the UK system because we're sat in London today. So you vote for a local member of parliament, and they have a 4 to 5 year term, let's say. And the idea is they go and they represent you for 4 or 5 years and make all of your decisions. Now, I would say in the days where news was slow, where it would take days for something that happens in Parliament or happens in the world to make it to a newspaper, to get into your hands, having a representative make decisions on your behalf makes a lot of sense. In a world of instant information, I almost feel like we need more democracy. We need more opportunities for people to participate in the decision-making process because they have access and people are widely educated at this point. And again, I don't know how we particularly get there. And one could argue there's some good arguments for not giving more participation because sometimes populations act in their self-interest. But I think in the absence of vision from governments, maybe part of the answer is handing more democracy back to people and to individuals.
It's a great point. It's a great philosophical point. Democracy was an invention. We're still using it today. I don't think we have evolved it very well to match the circumstances of the planet. We've done amazing work in improving democratic governance, even for climate change.
Yes.
You can see, though, that if one of the key players is not involved, decides that's not for me, they can choose to opt out. I'm talking about, climate change. So the question is democracy still a good tool? I think it is, but it needs to evolve. I think, and of course you have global, regional, local government.
Yes.
And they're all interconnected, as you know. So I believe myself in a federal model. I believe in a federation. I believe in the ability to nations to have a vision, a common vision up there that most nations contribute to, and they work as a federation, still independent, maintaining the requirements of the nation state, because today we can't eliminate it, but working towards a federal, not government, federal idea. It's like America as a federal idea. Really, America is an idea.
Yes.
It's based on an idea. Same thing here about what is the idea that the world should have on a federal level or a global level that we all agree with and that most people can understand, because if you communicate messages, complexity is one of the key ideas that I mentioned, but it's because today the world is too complex for people to actually understand it. There's too much going on in many places to be able to, what should I focus on? And unless you compartmentalize, I will focus only on environment, or I will focus on hunger, or I will focus on taxation. But everything is interconnected. Our model understands that all things are interconnected and they affect each other. So within that, I think if we arrive to that understanding, if everything's interconnected, therefore we cannot live in isolation.
Yes.
How can we create that federal idea for the world to align with?
I want to finish by bringing this back to one of the things we touched on. It's a key piece of Wealth Office, really. So, we make these episodes for a broad audience, but we talk a lot about themes that are very relevant to wealth and business owning families. Now, the world is in a moment which is called the Great Wealth Transfer. So more private wealth is passing between generations than at any time in history.
Yes.
For the first time, more than half of that wealth is passing into female hands, which in itself is an opportunity for potential
Finally, thank God.
Change. Finally, thank goodness. I have 2 daughters. I'm very much in favour of this world.
Me too.
That in itself could bring transformational change. But I want you to talk me through a scenario. If I was, say, in the summertime, I was at the business school at Oxford, and I was giving a seminar to, I think, around 20-something next generation family members. And They were all from wealth and business owning families. Some of their families were multi-generation, some of their fathers or mother were first generation. And in every case, part of that seminar was them thinking about, what do? I have this fantastic opportunity. I have a family with resource. I can go into the family business, or I can take the resources and go and create something else. But without exception, each and every one of them wanted to focus on not just on capital accumulation or wealth. They only really cared about what's the impact or purpose I can deploy this to. If you were a 25-year-old who was in one of those families and you had the opportunity to go and evolve the family business or create a new business, where would you start right now, given where the world is and given that duty we've talked about for stewardship of the family, but perhaps that higher order duty that now exists, which is stewardship of humanity and the world to a better place? If you have the resources, what do you do?
This answer might surprise you, but I would want to get my hands dirty. Because a lot of these could be investments, could get interested in this and deploy money, but get your hands dirty. Just the fact that a family member with such wealth wants to work, it's already a positive thing.
Yes.
Because I see a lot of family members that are wealthy that got maybe to an office at 10, leave at 12, and then come back, or they think that's the way. So be hardworking, use the values probably that your family had to get to where they got.
Yeah.
And it's not about a capital accumulation, it's about value creation. So you have to question what is the value creation in the future rather than the past. And therefore, I'm sure you're going to end up questioning, why isn't the healthcare system better? Or what can I do with the new technologies? So to me, the answer is get your hands dirty, go and study the areas that you're interested in, and make a dent in the world, because, as you said, private capital is the one that probably will change the world.
Yes. Nicholas, this has been fascinating and a pleasure.
Thank you very much.